Hi folks, Dave Schmidt here. It's the afternoon of June 9th as I'm coming to you today. And as you can see, well, I'm in a new setting. I had moved into another room or a different room here in the home where I live, and I love it here. It's a great place. I've got this big, huge window out here. I'm looking at what is called Elephant Peak, or I should say Elephant Ridge out here in the Sedona area, and right next to that is Bell Rock and Courthouse Butte. It's such a beautiful setting here as I have this nice bright room that I'm in contrast to where I used to be. So, well, what's happening? Last week, as you remember, I had the ambassador on as a guest, and he had shared some things that were a little bit controversial, and I had said some things also that some of you didn't really like. Well, let me take a step back and to describe with you, and I want to kind of give a little bit of a background of where I'm coming from and what's been happening here. As you can see on the plaque on the wall behind me, I used to be a state senator in Washington State. I served in the state legislature for 12 years. When I entered into the legislature, as so many people, I was committed to wanting to do what was right, wanting to serve the people, wanting to make my community, my state, and my world a better place for all of us in what way that I could do that. It didn't take very long before I began to realize I didn't have anywhere near the power as a legislator as people think and perceive us to have. Because what would happen was the legislative system had come down to that really the power only resides in a very few. It's always in the top senior leadership of what you call the majority party. They are the ones who make the decisions, and the rest of us, in so many words, are either asked to, forced to, or have to go along if we want to have any type of an effective whatsoever. You can only buck your leadership a few times where they will begin to ostracize you, shove you into a corner, or make you to be absolutely powerless, and all you're doing is just filling a seat. I began to realize that the legislative system that was supposed to be of the people and by the people really came down to having the power with just a few. And that was just basically your very top 2 and 3 elected leaders of the party that was in control. If you weren't in the majority party, you didn't have anything to say at all, because the majority party would collectively come together and shut you out. I also began to see how the power resided so much with the money. The power of corporations that would use their influence to buy votes. And it wasn't so much directly buying the vote as much as they were basically buying access. And then it was through their campaign contributions is where the power would indirectly come, because see, if you didn't win your re-election, you didn't have anything. And if you weren't in the majority party, you didn't have anything. I saw this system wasn't anything that I really thought it was. But here's the thing that I learned more than anything else. The real power in government doesn't lie with the elected officials. It lies with the top senior career people within the government agencies. Because you see, legislators were elected. We're here today and gone tomorrow. Governors and presidents are here today and gone tomorrow. Agency heads are here today and gone tomorrow because they're appointed by either a governor or a president. But that person that's right under the agency director, that's the person that's been there for 25, 30, and 35 years. They are the absolute expert in everything that goes on with that agency. They know how to run the system, they know how to give the appropriate advice, and they know how to manipulate the process to get what they want. That's where the real power lies, within government. And then secondly, when you put that into a position of the federal government, and then couple that with the power of money, and predominantly the power of the banking cartel system that we have within our world, you begin to realize that the real power of decision making only lies with a few. Now, I've been recently going through a book once again that I think is one of the absolute best sources if you really want to understand the power of money and the power of the banking cartel system within our world. But let me take another step back before I introduce you to that book. When I began to see that, I was always committed to wanting to tell the truth. I was always willing to want to find the truth. Because see, not only did I have a background of 20 years in politics, 12 years as an elected official, I also had a background in banking and finance. I was an employee in banking, I was on management training program, and I learned how the banking system worked and operated. Then I coupled that with my professional education was as a church minister in theology. And it's those three things that I bring to you what has been 40 years of experience to be able to know this is where I'm coming from and the things I get to share with you. I was always committed to doing right, and I was committed to the truth. Did I make mistakes? Absolutely. We all do. I've made my share of mistakes, and some of you can even see where I made one of my mistakes publicly, and I have posted my comment to that on my website, and you can go and see that anytime that you want to. But the thing was I was committed to the truth. Why? Because I truly understood the power that were in the words of Jesus when he said, "You will know the truth, and it is the truth that sets you free." We as a human race, for thousands of years, have been living subject to these banking cartel, this cabal ruling elite, as they have kept us in various forms of financial slavery for not hundreds of years, but thousands of years. They really run and control what goes on. And they do that secretly behind the scenes. They do that in what I call the shadow world. Now, as I said, if you really want to get to understand and know the shadow world of the banking cartel and how powerful they really are, then I encourage you to read this here book. It's called The Creature from Jekyll Island by J. Edward Griffin. This is absolutely by far the best source because he goes into details of explicit case histories, explicit numbers, and how they basically manipulate the financial system of the world to get what they want at our expense. Ironically, it was, I'm going blank on his name all of a sudden, it was Glenn Beck. When he was on Fox News, Glenn interviewed J. Edward Griffin, and where he basically spilled the beans on the power of the banking cartel. And that was the last show that Glenn Beck had on Fox News. Right after that show, they fired him. They got rid of him. Why? Because he revealed the truth about the real power and control of the money system. And he basically revealed the truth about the corruption in the media that plays along as well. Well, as I said, I had been committed to telling the truth. I finished my political career in 2006. Right after that, in 2007, I went into a very large real estate development project with a partner. I was on my way to making a lot of money through this real estate development project. Everything was solid. We ran the numbers many times. We basically had banks, in so many words, competing with who wanted to give us the loan. And before we were able to fully get into the project, we had the financial crash of 2008. And with that crash, I crashed as well. I lost everything I had because I had put everything I had into it. I basically had to file bankruptcy, and also I lost my home to foreclosure. And when I realized what was happening, it really ticked me off because I realized I had now become victim to this banking cartel as well. I realized that what they had done was what was called a classic pump and dump. They had manipulated the real estate system of giving loans to almost anybody who could put a breath on a mirror, and basically giving real estate loans to people that they knew darn well within 3 years there was absolutely no way they were going to be able to afford this new payment that they were going to have, and they knew these loans would crash and would create basically foreclosure system as a domino effect that would affect millions of people all around America, let alone all around the world. So they pumped up the debt. They pumped up the debt of millions and millions of people. People had lots of equity in their real estate, and they would go out and rack up hundreds of thousands of dollars in what is called home equity loans. Millions of people were increasing their debt in their real estate. Millions of people were buying new homes, and millions of people were increasing their debt in their credit cards. And then they crashed the system. And by doing that, in the process before the crash, it was kind of like the banking cartel says, I'm making lots of money right now as long as I'm not the last one left standing. In essence, it's a game of musical chairs, and all I have to do is make sure I'm not the last one standing left without a chair. This pump and dump scenario in the banking cartel didn't just produce literally thousands of new millionaires, it produced new billionaires. So once again, the banking cartel and all their buddies became extremely wealthy at the expense of the everyday people like you and me. Millions of people lost their homes to foreclosure. Millions of people found themselves in their homes underwater, which means they owned more on the home than it was worth. And here we are now, 9 years later, and people are still underwater in their homes. And we're leading up to a system where this false debt system that has been built up is about ready to crash. And this time it's not individuals, but now it's the countries, predominantly the G7 countries that are so far in debt they cannot escape. It's this indebted system, and it's this financial slavery system that I have basically now been speaking to, of wanting to understand the truth and to do the best that I can to relay that to you. Now, like you, I started learning about this GCR about 5 years ago. It was 2 years ago I became deeply involved in it, and it was about a year and a half ago that I started relaying messages through my radio program and these weekly newsletters that I bring your way. In this process, I've had the ability to learn a lot. I have the experience of understanding the corruption within the government system, and I have the experience of learning about the fraud and the corruption within the financial system as well. It was always my commitment to be willing to be a whistleblower if necessary. And in fact, some of you know that I've been on a TV program that's been on the Discovery Channel that's been showing for the last year and a half, and it's been seen by more than 30 million people. And in there, I step out and become the whistleblower as a former senator that is willing to say, this is how government lies, steals, and cheats, and they do it at the expense of us. Through this process, we've come to understand that there is this elite, this cabal, this cartel that runs and controls the world's money supply. But not only that, we've been able to learn with overwhelming evidence and proof from different types of historical records, from archaeological evidence, and also from stories of thousands and thousands of people, that they have one predominant goal: world control. They want to control the world, and they do that by controlling the world's money supply, and with a goal of creating a single source money supply of a banking system. And in that process, they keep their power and their control at the expense of us. But we're beginning to wake up, folks. We're beginning to understand that we have the ability to set ourselves free. It's about this financial freedom that I am committed to. And that's why I come to you and I share the things that I share. But in this GCR, I have also learned there's a lot of corruption, a lot of deception, and a lot of plain flat out lying that is coming at our expense. There are people in there that are operating that are not telling the truth. Last week there was a specific individual that I mentioned, and the reason I mentioned his name is because of the fact that it's public information. And I mentioned about TNT Tony, that he had pled guilty to basically a fraud charge that had been coming his way for a number of years. Some of you came back and emailed me and says, oh no, it can't be him. He's such an honest guy. He always tells the truth. He really cares about the people. And another person emailed me and says, you just don't have your facts correct. This can't be Anthony Renfro, RT&T Tony. He lives in California and the court case is in Kansas. Folks, the place of a court case has nothing to do with the domicile of the defendant. It has to do with the person who's bringing the charges and where he chooses to file the charges. This has been an ongoing case for over a year and a half. I have followed his court case. I've read the 19-page court docket that lays out explicitly all of the detailed information with the evidence that is brought against him. And when I first read that, I said, this is a slam dunk. This guy is going to be found guilty with all this evidence that was brought before him. It was about a fraudulent system that he had ran some years back where he basically was guaranteeing people a certain return on their money of their investment in a short period of time. And it was absolutely proven that he took in millions of dollars from people, didn't deliver on what he had promised, and spent the money on himself. All you have to do is go back and read the court case for yourself. That's public record. There have already been 4 or 5 different people who have basically posted the results of this court case on the internet and YouTube. And not only that, on May 21st, when TNT Tony went into the Kansas City District Court, there was one guy that was there waiting him, and he videotaped him. He recognized him as Tony Renfo, TNT Tony. And he says, hey, Tony. He called him out. Tony turns and responds to the name and says, hey, I hear you're pleading guilty today. And Tony turns around and flat out lies to him and says, oh, no, I'm not. And yet he walked into the courtroom and that day pled guilty to this fraud charge that he had been putting off for a couple of years of going to court on. He kept delaying it as much as possible. Now, why am I saying this? Because I am committed to the truth. I don't desire to come out and expose all kind of people. I have a lot of information that has come from different types and sources of investigative people that I can tell you not only is TNT Tony, is this the second time he's being convicted, because he has a prior federal conviction against him as well. There's another guy that basically came right out and threatened the ambassador's life, and that was Neil Keenan. And Neil Keenan has been proven to be an absolute fraud in what he does. There is a series of messages called the Goldwater Report. Google that, or go into YouTube and put in the Goldwater Report, and you can listen to them for yourself of the evidence that tells you who Neil Keenan is, his background, how he has defrauded people out of over $500,000, and yet he still continues to lie about his association with the family. I can go on and on and on, and you don't want to hear all that stuff. I'm not going to name any other names. I do Tony because it's public record. I do Neil Keenan because he has flat out fraudulently basically threatened the ambassador's life and lied about his association with the family, is where I come from. There's another one that is very well known that has a past federal criminal history record on him. There's another one that is well known that basically now has charges brought against him in his home state, and he has been found guilty of financial fraud. There are a number of these people that are reporting to you that are criminals, folks. There is another friend of mine that used his ability to hire some of the best investigators that are available, and they did investigation on all these private contracts, and they found out who were going to be the paymasters. The paymasters are the people that are going to pay you, that are going to give you your money. And they found out that over 70% of the paymasters also have federal criminal records against them. The number of these dinar gurus that are reporting to you, the most influential ones, are the ones that have the most criminal record. Now, why would that be? Obviously, this type of a situation where you can get rich quick is going to attract that type of people. But here's my concern. There are thousands and thousands of us that we're listening to them. I did so in the beginning, but it didn't take me very long to realize these guys aren't telling the truth. And we've been listening to them and believing them, and in the process of believing, we're denying ourselves the very thing that we want. Now let me tell you why there is not going to be a public RV. Well, let me rephrase that. Yes, there could be a public RV at the rate that you currently paid for your dinar, because the country of Iraq could choose to do that. But there is not going to be a public RV at 70 cents, $1, $3, $5, $10 on the Iraqi dinar. Why? When it's a public RV, which means you take your dinar into the bank and exchange it at a bank, it means the country of Iraq is buying its dinar back from you. If you take if you have a Canadian $100 bill and you want to exchange it into American currency, you walk into the bank exchanges it for you at the going exchange rate. But what's happening is the bank is buying it, I should say Canada is buying it back from you through the bank as their intermediary means of exchange. And Canada is going to give to you its current going rate. If they inflated that rate, that's money that's coming out of their pocket. Now let's go to the Iraqi dinar. Right now, you and I can buy that dinar for about 1/10 of a penny. Anything above that, of which we bought it from Iraq at that rate, of which Iraq got paid for at that rate, anything above that, Iraq is paying for. Let's say it's $1. Well, I personally am aware of over 100 trillion dinar out there to exchange. That means Iraq has to come up with 100 trillion US dollars to buy that dinar back from you and me and large groups and countries, because it's the countries that have the most dinar that you never hear about. So where's Iraq going to get 100 trillion dinar? And why would they pay for it at that rate when they get nothing for it? If they buy something back at 1,000 times more than what they sold it for, they have no financial gain in that. If Iraq had $100 trillion, do you really think they would give it to people like you and me that could become overnight millionaires and they get nothing for it? Of course not. They are going to basically use that money. If they had it, they would use it for themselves. That's common sense, folks. Would you sell something for a penny and then turn around and buy it back at $100 just to be nice to somebody else? Now magnify that to the size of a country. A country in Iraq's situation just doesn't do that. You see, it's common sense. There is not going to be a public RV at that type of a rate, because Iraq has no incentive whatsoever to do that, to buy it back at a public rate. Now let's talk about some of the private exchanges. When I first got in this, involved in this, the reason I was willing to believe that it was possible, because like so many of us, I asked, where's the money going to come from? Who's going to pay for it? And what was explained to me was the Iraqi oil credits. Well, at that time, that made sense to me, because I thought that's a possible scenario that could happen. But in the last 2 years, since I got involved in that, this thing has so exploded and gotten so out of control that is never, ever going to happen. That a private oil exchange credit contract between China and Iraq and as private groups is going to happen. There might be a couple very small ones that will be able to pull it off. But let me again tell you why that is so highly unlikely. First of all, the total value of Iraq's oil in the ground at today's rates is just over $10 trillion. They still have to pull it out of the ground, pump it, and sell it at the going existing rates just to get $10 trillion. Well, $10 trillion of oil for the next 10 and 20 years isn't going to pay for $100 million of basically a currency exchange. There might be some very small ones, but let me tell you why that is so unpractical. They're not stupid. They know that there is free energy sources that are out there in the scores that have been developed by inventors that at some point in time is going to be released. These free energy sources are being kept from us by the powerful cabal elite. They don't want it released to the public. Why would Iraq commit to a 10, 20, or 30-year oil contract knowing that there's a potential within 3 to 5 years oil is going to be obsolete? Stupid. And it's the same thing for China. Why would China commit to 10, 20, and 30 years of oil and pay for all of that, knowing that in a few years it's possible for there to be free energy? Totally stupid. We are on a course that within 3, 5, 7 years, most likely, oil and petroleum as energy sources are going to be obsolete and no longer needed. So you see, the oil credits contract just doesn't make sense. Neither does the public exchange. It just does not make economic sense for the parties that are involved. And that's why I personally believe those are never going to happen in that manner. In August of last year and since then, I have been consistently saying there is not going to be an RV exchange in the way that it's being reported to you in the Dinar Guru sites. So why do they then continue to report that? Well, before I get onto that, let me step back now and talk about this relationship that I have with who is called the Dragon family. You've heard about some of what are called the global asset accounts that comes from Karen Hudis. And you want to know what? She says there's a couple $1 trillion there. And you want to know what? She's right. It is there. And you heard about the reports from Neil Keenan about all this gold. And in spite of his own fraudulent activities, the gold he talks about, it's there. It's for real. And you've heard about Leo Wanta, who was involved with the Reagan administration, and a couple $1 trillion of these gold reserves that were available for the people. You're right. It is there. And there are even more that you've heard about, and they are all there. But here's what I have learned because of my involvement with the Dragon family that goes back about a year and my 3 trips to China where I have met with the Red Dragon and the elders. Those reports are about this much of a gold that they have either directly in their control or under their supervision that is basically this much. Folks, there's so much gold out there, you and I can't even begin to comprehend it. Now you will say, what do you mean? Well, where is it? This gold, through the power of the family and also through the power of the cabal, has been kept hidden and secret from us. Now, at a later time, I'll tell you how I understand that. But historical records, if you know where to look, archaeological evidence, if you know where to look, and the different sources will tell you that they have been collecting this gold for thousands and thousands of years. The history that has been reported to us in our history books is a deliberate misinformation from the cabal to keep us from understanding what is out there for us as we learn how to go about bringing it into ourselves. It's about being set free, folks. It's about financial freedom. When we learn how to operate in an appropriate manner, when we learn how to, most of all, to think and retrain our minds in an appropriate manner, that's when the vast majority of all these resources will be released to us. If you've come to my workshops, I teach about the power of thinking, the power of thought. This is not just something that is new, and it's not a bunch of woo-woo thinking. This is all proven through research, medical research, and scientific research on the power of human thought and what it does to create what it is that you experience. As long as we as a collective are in the position of wanting, or more important, with all the power of positive thinking, hoping, dreaming, visualizing, if you're still putting your trust of sources of information that are lying to you, that are deceiving you, or are not coming from a position of truth, then all of your powerful positive thinking will never come about. Why? It's about the energy that these thoughts produce. When people don't come to you from a position of truth, whether it's consciously or subconsciously, they're producing an energy source that is basically very low in its vibratory status, and it will only produce the energy of what it is producing. And if you're putting your trust, your hope, your belief in something that is coming from a low energy source, you will never produce the positive energy source. It's that plain and simple. So as long as you continue to believe in sources of information that are not based in truth, that are not based in practical probability of reality happening, and that are coming from sources of convicted felons that continue to lie and deceive, then it isn't going to produce the energy to bring it about for us. Now, let me give an illustration of what I mean by that. As I've said to you, and this is my own personal opinion, I think TNT Tony suffers from what is called bipolar disorder. He has all the signs of it. On the surface, before the people, before the public, he is a wonderful guy, filled with energy, gives you a lot of hope, gives you a lot of stuff to hope for. But here's what I have access to. I have access to people that tap into his phone calls in private, that tap into his emails privately. And what you see in the private is a person that's the exact opposite. Angry, lying, cheating, stealing, laughing at how he deceives all of you. Phone calls that I could produce, but I won't, because then I'd be giving away my sources. So what you see is bipolar. Before the public, one person; privately, a total Jekyll and Hyde situation that's totally different. And that's the real person that he is behind the scenes. And the people that do the private investigation sources, they know that. And as long as you continue to believe in someone like that, that's what it produces. So not only do I think he has bipolar disorder, why do I understand that? Because my mother had bipolar disorder. I grew up with it. I could see how my mother, before the public, was the absolutely most wonderful, loving woman that I could think of. But get her at home behind the closed doors, she would go into fits of rage. She would have deep anger, and she would basically even attack my father with a knife. So I grew up with a child around this stuff, so I understand that. So not only does he have bipolar disorder, I also believe that he's a pathological liar, because he fits the profile. The thing is, with pathological liars, they can be very, very convincing, and they very deeply believe in what they are saying. And they are totally blind and oblivious to the truth of what's taking place. So as he continues to say, folks, you're going to get your 800 numbers this weekend, he truly believes that. But there's no basis of truth behind the facts of what he is saying. And his mind totally shuts out reality, that there's no factual basis to what he is saying, and he only lives in that existing moment that I got to have this and I got to have it now. Pathological liars fill our prisons. You go into the prisons around America, and you will find 60 to 70% of the people in these prisons that are convicted felons of very serious crimes. They absolutely believe they are innocent. In their minds, they don't even believe that they committed the crime, and they didn't even see themselves doing it, and they believe it was someone else. It's what's called a distorted mindset. Now, when you get this opportunity to have this much wealth and this much power, you're going to find a lot of people that are under those conditions. They're reporting things to you that they absolutely believe is true within their minds, and they're totally committed to it. But when you dig down to underneath it and you see the facts, you begin to realize there's no way for that to happen. And as long as we are the ones who are believing that, trusting in them, aligning with them without knowing that, then we subconsciously are aligning with the energy of what they are producing, and it will only be what they are producing. At some point in time, we as a collective have to be willing to step forward and believe the truth. And the truth is, there are people out there that are deceptively lying to you. There are people that are out there that are making a lot of money off of you. And there also are other sources that have set this up as a deliberate trap. They keep allowing, there are what I call investigative police power authorities that allow these people to continue to operate because it's like trying to catch a drug addict. If you've got a low-level drug dealer who is basically leading you to the source of the kingpin, you're going to allow them to continue to dealing his drugs so you can catch the source. And there are government authorities that are out there that do that because they have all the ability to, behind the scenes, to tap into the list of all these people who have signed up for all these private exchanges and then be able to do the investigations on them and find out who are the true criminals that they want to correct. So you see, folks, when the reports come around that there's going to come a day that there's going to be mass arrests, well, some of the mass arrests are going to be people that are on these lists. So that's why this stuff continues to go on, but I can practically tell you none of those dinar gurus are going to be the source of the money for you to experience an RV or a GCR. It isn't going to happen. Because, see, the only place on this earth that has the money to pay for that is the Dragon family. And it's like what I said last week and what the ambassador says. They are not going to release millions, billions, and trillions of dollars into the current existing corrupt banking system that is run by these cabal banking cartels. And secondly, the cabal doesn't want people like you and me becoming overnight millionaires when we are the ones who basically want to get rid of them. That would be like them saying, here, let me give you the gun that you can shoot and kill me with. Do you think they're going to do that? Of course not. It's time for us folks to come up with some common sense. The common sense is the money doesn't exist on this planet to fund an RV, or as all these dinar gurus are telling us. The common sense is there is not going to be a public exchange at a much higher inflated rate for the Iraqi dinar. Common sense is the oil credit private contracts aren't going to happen because either Iraq or China would be crazy to enter into contracts of more than 5 years. And that money doesn't exist to pay for it. And common sense is when there's investigative reports that says the vast majority of all these paymasters have federal criminal records, along with a lot of the dinar gurus that are reporting to you, that you're not getting the truth when they're pathological liars and basically filled with bipolar disorder types of behavior patterns. These people aren't coming to you, and you and I aren't going to benefit from that. The only place it's going to come from is the family. And they're not releasing it into the current existing banking system. And I said last week, do not expect that system to be ready to release funds to you and me minimally until September. Nothing is going to happen then. I'm not projecting the September date. I'm saying that's the next date that we'll take a look at this again. I'm committed to the truth. And I'm going to share with you the truth as I understand it and as I know it. I'm not afraid to tell that truth. I've made my mistakes, and I wasn't afraid to come out and say it publicly. I didn't hide from anything. I refuse to hide from anything because I know it is some of the most demoralizing, powerful, retreating, if that's the appropriate term I could use, that I could do to myself. If truth sets me free, I can't hide. Because hiding, when you hide, you're not living in truth. When you're operating in fear, you're not living in truth. I refuse to let fear have any type of an impact in my life. Truth sets us free. But to do that, we have to be willing to let go of our fear and step into the truth that this isn't going to happen as you think it's going to happen. I've learned that. I've been waiting for almost 1 year to say this. I would have loved to have said this sooner, but I was restricted basically by certain requests of certain people. We are now at a point that this is all starting to unfold. We're at a point that our countries, predominantly the G7 countries, are on the verge of financial collapse. The United States is at 235% debt in contrast to its annual gross domestic product. I don't care who you are. No country can exist with that kind of debt. The G7 countries are in just as much debt. There's great fear that about if Greece chooses to not pay its debt, that it will collapse. These G7 countries have been kicking the can down the road for more than a year, putting off the inevitable. And different resources, and what I call mainstream resources, are beginning to come on to mainstream TV programs, CNBC, Bloomberg Report, Fox Business News, and saying the inevitable is on its way. And they are all alluding to, in one way or another, this fall, most likely September. That's the truth as I know it and as I report it to you. I have the opportunity to have contact with some people who really know what goes on in the shadow world behind the scenes. And they'll tell you the same thing that I told you. So folks, my challenge to you is turn off the Dinar Guru news that isn't true. If it doesn't make sense, turn it off. Because as long as you continue to feed on it and report on it and watch it and read it and hope it, then you're delaying the inevitable of what you want for yourself. And all you're doing is feeding that system. I could go on and on. You don't want to hear me going on and on. That's a different story. But when I bring these things to you, I bring them as facts as I know it. Now, I also am going to say this. If I'm wrong, if you've got factual evidence that I am wrong, then tell me. But do me a favor. Don't shoot from the hip thinking it's facts. Do your homework. You see, a fractional reserve banking system isn't going to pay for an RV, because that means they have to go out and borrow the money from somewhere or create it as fiat currency out of thin air of what our Federal Reserve System does now, and that's the system that's creating the indebtedness for us that we want to get rid of. So don't think that you're going to become rich out of an RV when it's going to become a fiat system that just creates the money out of thin air. People have tried to say, well, that's where the money's going to come from. That system doesn't work, folks. It just doesn't work, okay? If you've got some absolute facts, then please, if I am wrong, then please show me. Explain it to me. Send it to me in an email. And I'll come back to you in the following weekly reports and I'll tell you where I was wrong. But I've done my homework. I've been working on this for a year and a half. And I'm absolutely confident in what I have to say. I've checked my facts. I've waited for a year to say this to you. Because, see, I desire us as a collective humanity to be set free from this oppressive financial slavery that has been placed on us. I desire for us to be able to move into what was meant for us, the actual natural place of divine guidance that we are supposed to be. And that's a place of abundance, a place of freedom, and a place of flow of peace. That's the world that is the natural world for us. And we are the only ones that deny ourselves of that because we choose to not believe the truth. Step into the truth and freedom will begin to unfold for all of us. Now, thank you very much, folks. Thank you for listening to this week. I encourage you to come and join me on the radio program to listen to this. I encourage you to call in. If you've got facts that are different, call into the program and tell me about it. We'll discuss that there. If you don't want to talk about it publicly, then send me an email and I'll bring it up on the program. I love all of you. I'm committed to this and doing this as I believe it to be, and I want to thank all of you for listening. Okay, thanks a lot. Bye-bye.